Brave is a word we stamp on men who stand up to instead of kneel before danger. Bravery is courage. Bravery is valor. Bravery is, to be honest, more difficult to define than I thought. Is a man fighting for his life brave, or is that just instinct? When he fixes a knife to his rifle and pumps his legs right at an enemy machine gun pit, is he brave? Stupid? Maybe he'd just rather do that than sit in his own pit next to his nerves. Are the soldiers of a fighting nation brave because they suffered a great many deaths and went on fighting? Are the dead brave simply because we'd rather remember them as brave instead of dead? I urge you to ponder these questions and others just like them as we progress through this video, in which we're going to discuss 7 minor countries which fielded the bravest soldiers of the Second World War. While it is a futile pursuit subjectively, we're also going to give our opinion on which country had the bravest soldiers of all. The Finns fought for their very existence in World War II, first alone against the territory-hungry Soviet Union, then against the Soviets with the Germans at their side, and then against the Germans. While they were brave, capable warriors who never entirely surrendered their country's independence, their bravery shone brightest in that first conflict with the USSR, the Winter War. While the disparity in troop numbers wasn't immense, the disparity in tanks and aircraft was. The Finns just had 0.5% of the tanks the Soviets had, and their air force accounted for just 2.9% of the Soviets. Yet, despite this, the Finns inflicted up to 380,000 casualties on the Soviets for a payment of just 70,000 casualties. The whole world watched the Winter War, jaws slackened by the bravery, the sisu, of the Finns, and Churchill famously said, "Finland alone, in danger of death. Superb, sublime Finland shows what free men can do." In the period known as the interim peace between the Winter War and the Continuation War, Baron Mannerheim, Finnish commander-in-chief, addressed his troops. "You did not want war, but you were forced into it. You dealt hard blows to the invader, and if 2 million of our enemies now lie in the snowdrifts and in the forests, the fault is not yours. You merely followed the stern law of war. Kill or be killed." As the Finns were outnumbered and outgunned in the Winter War, so too were the Greeks in the Greco-Italian War, and the German invasion and occupation that followed. Before the Greco-Italian War, the Axis had yet to suffer a defeat, and it did not expect to suffer one on Greek spears. Fighting with lion-like ferocity for their homes, wives, and children, the Greeks sent the Italians back into Albania, shaming Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. Then, however, the Germans stepped in, taking all of Greece. This is when Greek bravery shone the brightest. While wrestling for the Greek island of Crete, Cretan civilians took up sticks and stones and stabbed and bashed armed German soldiers to death. When Greece was lost, both soldiers and civilians fought against their Axis occupiers in resistance groups, accounting for more than a quarter of Greece's population, and this was all while between 7 and 11% of that population perished in the occupation. Hitler said it himself, "The Greeks, of all the adversaries who confronted us, fought with bold courage and the highest disregard of death." As with the example of Greeks, Polish bravery cannot be attributed solely to the country's soldiers. Poland suffered more, perhaps, than any other country in the Second World War, enduring an invasion by both the Nazis and Soviets, and taking the brunt of the Holocaust. Like Finland, landlocked Poland's existence was at stake, and its soldiers and civilians fought with desperation and bravery, refusing to surrender. During enemy occupation, the Polish soldiers of the defeated Polish military as well as civilians regrouped in a number of resistance forces and fought superior enemies. Through all of this and throughout all the war, between 16 and 22% of Poland's population perished, yet Polish bravery did not falter. After the invasion of Poland, Polish soldiers even went on to fight for the Polish government in exile and the Allies in the fall of France. Of the 80,000 Poles in this fight, only 19,000 survived, and instead of tapping out after being evacuated to Britain, they got straight back into the fight, forming the foundation of what would become the Polish armed forces in the West. Other soldiers deported from Poland into the Soviet Union in the original September 1939 invasion ultimately formed the backbone of the Polish armed forces in the East. Theirs was a bravery fueled by seething hatred for their enemies, and you need look no further than men like Witold Pilecki, the Auschwitz volunteer, if you think Polish soldiers weren't deserving of a place in this video. The sacrifices of British India in the Second World War are often forgotten, and this is especially insane because Indian soldiers were some of the bravest on the battlefield. The British Indian Army was a volunteer force, yet it grew to a strength of 2.5 million throughout the war. These soldiers fought everywhere, and they paid a blood price of around 87,000 toward the ultimate Allied victory. Without the bravery of British Indian soldiers in the battles of Imphal and Kohima, the Japanese Yugo offensive would likely have been successful, and the Burma campaign would have ended disastrously for the Allies. Such would have been the case for the infamous Battle of Monte Cassino, and many other battles too. There were countless Indian war heroes, with Indian soldiers receiving 4,000 awards for gallantry, and the deeds of men like Naik Fazal-Din and Sepoy Namdev Jadhav speak for Indian bravery overall. As British Major Tom Conway put it, Indian soldiers were the bravest of the brave. It was an honour to command them. Ireland was officially neutral in the Second World War, so the brave Irish civilians, and even more so soldiers who fought alongside the British for the Allied cause, were risking more than just their lives. On the latter, some 5,000 Irish soldiers literally deserted the Irish army to serve in the British army, and they did this even though they would basically be disowned when they got home. Those who did get home lost their jobs and were denied fruitful employment. Their families quite literally starved to death. The son of an Irish soldier who fought in the Battle of Kohima described his life after the war. "My father was blacklisted and away all the time, picking turnips or whatever work he could get. We were treated as outcasts." What we must also consider is that some 60% of Ireland was pro-German. Imagine leaving your country to fight an enemy which more than half of your country was sympathetic. Randall Sadlier, on why he joined the Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers in 1943, said, "It seemed obvious that if England lost the war, the Germans would soon occupy Ireland and the Dark Ages would return." It wasn't until 2013 that the Irish state acknowledged the Irish soldiers who gave up more than their lives for the Allied cause, saying, "These individuals contributed in no small part to the Allied victory against tyranny and totalitarianism. If the United Kingdom had fallen to the forces of Nazi Germany, Ireland would have suffered the same fate." Canadians earned a reputation as shock troopers in the Great War, and this carried over to World War II, making for some of the absolute bravest soldiers on the battlefield. What we must understand is that, of the 1.1 million Canadians which fought for the Allies, the majority were volunteers. These volunteers fought with distinction in almost every theatre, but their bravery in the D-Day Normandy landings was indisputable. The task that befell the Canadians was to take Juno Beach, the second most resisted beachhead. Up against German artillery, machine guns, mines and traps, the Canadians grit their teeth and punched further inland than any other soldiers. In historian Mark Zulk's words, the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division ended the day ahead of either the US or British divisions, despite the fact that they landed last and that only the Americans at Omaha faced more difficulty winning a toehold on the sand. Of course, we can't speak of Canadian bravery without giving a mention to Leo Major, the man who wore an eye patch and single-handedly took the entire city of Twola from its Nazi occupiers in just one night. Actually, maybe this wasn't bravery, but absolute madness. As is customary, we've saved who we believe to be the bravest soldiers to last. Despite losing the Emu War, the Aussies hit World War II hard, earning a reputation as brave, capable soldiers and loyal friends. Australians fought in the Pacific, North Africa, the Mediterranean, the Middle East, Europe, and at home with the utmost distinction. And even in the darkest of times, a smile, paying some 27,000 lives toward the price of Allied victory. On the Aussies, Lieutenant General Sir Adrian Carton de Viet said, "For dash and gallantry, the bloodthirsty Scots, Australians and Canadians led the way, with the impetuous Irish close behind. The Australians, to my mind, were the most aggressive. They loved a fight. They were a curious mixture of toughness and sentimentality. And on the morning of D-Day, Major General Freddie de Gungan said, "My God, I wish we had the 9th Australian Division with us this morning." If our bias toward the Aussies wasn't clear enough, German Commander Alvin Rommel described Australian soldiers as immensely big and powerful men who without question represented an elite formation of the British Empire. Anyways, bias aside, the soldiers of every fighting nation exhibited bravery in World War II, and there are countless examples of this. But for the 7 nations we covered in this video, can you think of any specific acts of bravery exhibited by their soldiers? And in general, do you agree that the soldiers of these nations were among the bravest of the war? Or have we missed a few that you think deserve to be in this video? Now, I do know there's plenty of other countries that had their brave soldiers as well, but we could really only fit 7 into this video. So we might make a part 2, but just let us know what you think in the comments down below. Anyways guys, just before you go, if you want to join our wider history community, make sure you join our front Discord where you can chat to myself and other history buffs. And if you want access to exclusive content you won't find on this channel, then make sure you check out the Instagram and Facebook links in the description below. And if you do want to help support the channel more than you already are by watching this video, check out the Patreon. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching and I hope you learned something new.